The taste of copper filled my mouth, metallic and sharp, pressing against the back of my throat, as if the very air had turned to blood. I did not know if it came from fear or from biting my tongue, but it lingered there, undeniable, just like the cold steel under my bare feet. The chamber hummed with its own rhythm, data slates flickering cogitators, clattering quills, scratching a choir of bureaucracy that had no need for melody, only repetition. The clerk's voice cut through it, not with force, but with absolute emptiness, a flat monotone that carried no hint of judgment or compassion. Citizen Kalen Voss. Designation 77, Alpha 99992. You have been selected for the Emperor's sacred service. That was all. No speech of honor, no blessing, no warning. Just a number read from a slate spoken aloud with the precision of a machine. And in that moment, my entire life shifted, redirected not by choice or merit, but by a designation on a list. The chamber of the Administratum was as gray and lifeless as the men who worked inside it. The walls were painted in a color that did not exist in nature, neither stone nor steel, only an absence of warmth that pressed down on the eyes. Rows of humming slates glowed faintly, throwing pale light across stacks of parchment that smelled faintly of dust and ink. The air was stale dry, recycled 1,000 times through vents that coughed and wheezed without relief. Quills scratched in endless rhythm, cogitators clicked like mechanical teeth gnashing. And together, these sounds drowned out the idea of silence. The adept never looked at me. His head remained bent, his shoulders hunched as though centuries of paperwork had bent his spine into its current shape. His robes were functional, the kind that bore stains of ink where the sleeves rubbed against parchment day after day. His augment eye whirred and clicked, adjusting to streams of information that scrolled faster than human vision could follow. The sound of its movement was like grinding wheels, familiar and yet alien in this chamber. To him, I was nothing but a flicker of data, a line to be read, a designation to be stamped. I realized then that I was less to him than the scratches of a quill, less than the hum of the slate, just another soul shuttled from one ledger into another. I tried to speak to ask if there was some mistake, but my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. My hands twitched, involuntarily calloused from years of factory labor, the skin stained with oil that never fully washed away. 15 years of feeding grain into grinding wheels, of shoving, scraping, pulling, resetting, of keeping the blades aligned. And the dust cleared of knowing the rhythm of the machine more intimately than the rhythm of my own breath. That rhythm still echoed in my muscles as I stood there, as if my body refused to accept the chamber's decree. The sound of the factory lived in me, and yet it meant nothing now. In the sterile hum of the Administratum, my life's work was erased with a single phrase sacred service. The words offered no explanation. They hung in the air like smoke, impossible to grasp. I forced my lips to move the words, breaking from me in a whisper too fragile for such a vast chamber. There must be some mistake. I am just a worker. I have no training, no skill. My voice echoed against the steel walls, small and hollow, as if mocking itself. For a moment, the adept's augment eye clicked louder, adjusting focus, scrolling. Then slowly he raised his head. One eye was human, ringed with pale exhaustion, the eye of someone who had not seen true sunlight in decades. He looked at me, not as a man looks at another man, but as an auditor looks at a figure on a page. There is no mistake, he said, and the faintest ripple of something that might have been pity or envy or nothing at all passed across his face. The Emperor has chosen you. The word struck harder than any blow. The Emperor. The name itself crushed all argument. If the Emperor had chosen, then resistance was not defiance of bureaucracy. It was defiance of humanity's God. My knees felt weak. The chamber pressed in tighter, the walls closer, the air thinner. The copper taste surged stronger, and I swallowed hard to keep from gagging. The adept's gaze fell back to his slate, his human eye dim, his augment whirring. And in that instant, I knew the conversation was finished. My life had been redirected. The grinding wheels, the oil stains, the small life of Sector Gamma 7, all of it had already been logged under completed. There was nothing left to argue, no appeal to make. The decision had been carved into record before I had even walked into the chamber. I turned to leave my bare feet slapping softly against the metal floor. The hum of the lumens followed me, steady and oppressive. Each step echoed too loud, as if mocking me for thinking I still had control over where those steps would lead. The copper taste did not fade. If anything, it deepened as though each breath was filled with rust and iron. I walked out, not toward freedom, but toward farewell, toward the end of what I had thought was my life, into the corridor that would carry me back to my Hab unit, where the last hours of that life waited to be lived in silence. The room was beige, 8 meters by 6, a box of silence, where nothing stirred and nothing offered comfort. My Hab had always been small, but tonight it felt smaller, as if the walls themselves pressed inward, waiting for me to leave them forever. The cot stood where it always stood, its thin frame creaking at the slightest touch. The ration unit hummed faintly in the corner, its panel light blinking with mechanical patience. A lavatory alcove reeked of disinfectant sharp enough to sting the nose. The air was dry, recycled flat, and the walls were the color of old paper, yellowed tired, a shade that spoke of years without change. On the desk, the only thing that belonged to me, stared back with a defiance the room could not suppress. A picture frame. Inside it, 2 faces smiled. My parents caught forever on the day of their wedding 47 years ago, their eyes lit with the belief that the future would be brighter than the past. My father's hand rested on my mother's shoulder, her head tilted gently toward him, and together they radiated a hope that felt almost heretical in this room. I traced their frozen expressions with my eyes until the lines blurred. I tried to imagine what they would think. Now, would they believe that their son had been chosen for an honor? Or would they see the cruel truth beneath the word sacred? The ration unit beeped, and I answered it out of habit. A corpse starch bar slid into the tray. I bit it once, twice, and each time the flavor fell apart. It was supposed to echo meat, to whisper of nourishment, but tonight it was only dust on my tongue, grit in my throat, ash that would not go down. I spat the 3rd bite back and pushed the rest away. I had no appetite left. I turned to the sanctioned texts the small collection allowed to me and opened the primer Imperialis. I had read its words countless times on break at the factory, in the still hours of night, reciting the phrases like prayers to remind myself that the Imperium had purpose. But now, the lines shifted before my eyes, slipping and twisting as if they no longer wanted to be read. They blurred until they meant nothing, black shapes on a page that had abandoned me. I shoved the book back into the drawer. My gaze climbed instead to the ceiling panels. I counted them as if counting mattered. 63 dents, 12 rust spots, 1 panel crooked. I mouthed the numbers again and again until they were rhythm, until they drowned out the sound of my own heart. I tried to sleep. I lay on the cot, the blanket scratchy against my skin and the air too dry, the hum of the ration unit too steady. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the adept's face, the pale ring of exhaustion around his human eye, the whir of the augment that never blinked. And I heard his words again. There is no mistake. The Emperor has chosen you. The phrase grew louder each time it returned, echoing until it was a chant, a litany that banished rest. I shifted left, shifted right, pulled the blanket up, pushed it down. Nothing. Sleep did not come. Appetite gone. Meaning gone. Sleep gone. Only waiting remained. The room seemed to wait with me, humming faintly beige walls, watching ration unit blinking like an eye. Then the chime struck, the 19th hour. It split the air, sharp as judgment, final as a gavel. My body rose before my mind, agreed not with hunger, not with rest, but with inevitability. I crossed the room one last time, touched the picture frame with my fingertips, brushed the plast steel glass as though their smiles might pass into me. But the frame was cold, and the smile stayed frozen. The metal door slid open. The corridor outside glowed with lumen light. When it sealed behind me with a hiss, the sound was too final, too much like the end of a life already over. The capsule was smaller than I expected, close and confining, lined with polished wood and fittings of brass that gleamed faintly under soft lumen light. It was nothing like the gray transport tubes of the hive. This place smelled of incense instead of recycled air, the fragrance cloying sweet, heavy enough to burn in the lungs. 8 of us sat inside, facing one another on benches too narrow for comfort, the silence between us, a thicker presence than the smoke curling in the air. My reflection wavered faintly in the scratched plast steel window, pale eyes staring back at me, lips pressed thin, and around me I saw the same unease mirrored on every face. The first to break the silence was the woman across from me. She could not have been older than 25, her shoulders bent forward with the posture of someone who had spent her life leaning over data slates. Her fingers clutched a small Aquila pendant knuckles, pale her lips, whispering prayers that carried no sound. When her eyes flicked up and found mine, she managed a thin smile that did not reach her face. "Mira Ka," she said softly, the syllables delicate as thread. "Data analyst, 3rd class, Beta 9. I nodded. "Kaylin Voss, maintenance worker, Gamma 7. The words sounded hollow, a name and a number that already no longer belonged to me. Next to her sat an older man with burn-scarred hands. The skin melted and pitted as though fire had taken bites out of him. His voice was roughened by smoke when he spoke. "Marcus Thorne, fuel processor, 38 years. Thought I'd die in the pipes. Never expected this." His eyes carried the same resignation. I felt tired and brittle, but still searching for sense in the senseless. Beside him, a young girl barely 18 whispered her name. Helena Vex. Textiles. Since I was a child. Her voice wavered thin as worn cloth, and her gaze stayed fixed on her knees, as if lifting her head was too much to ask. Across from her, a man shifted his augment arm, ticking softly, metal fingers, tapping his leg in a rhythm that betrayed his nerves. Dimitri Vasquez, tech servitor operator, got the AUG 3 years ago. Didn't think it would matter. His words sounded rehearsed, spoken not to us, but to himself. Next to him, a boy fidgeted endlessly, his leg jerking, his fingers twitching. His eyes darted around the capsule as though searching for an escape. Jarn Cole, Youth Brigade. That was all he said, but the crack in his voice revealed more than his words. The last spoke with the slow steadiness of age. Her face was deeply lined, her skin weathered, her hands marked by soil that no washing could erase. Senathele, Agridomes, 40 years fighting poisoned ground. She met each of our eyes in turn, as if daring anyone to look away. We were ordinary. Ordinary lives, ordinary fears stitched into a tapestry that the Imperium had pulled tight for its own design. None of us heroes. None of us trained for glory. Just a handful of workers pulled from the endless machine, summoned to serve in a way we could not yet understand. The capsule hummed beneath us, vibration crawling up our spines, the movement steady, endless. The scratched plast steel windows warped our faces into ghosts. I looked again at my reflection, and it no longer seemed entirely mine. Marcus broke the silence with a low voice, almost a growl. My grandfather told stories about the palace. Said there were places down there where they fed souls into machines. Said people disappeared, never to be seen again. Batteries, he called them. The words hung in the capsule like smoke, heavy and poisonous. Helena shivered, drawing her arms tighter around herself. Mira pressed her Aquila pendant to her lips and whispered, "The Emperor protects." Her voice cracked a prayer spoken more as plea than certainty. Senna spat on the floor, the sound sharp in the small chamber. "All service serves a purpose," she said, her tone dry, "but that doesn't mean we survive it." The capsule jolted, suddenly throwing us against the benches. A few gasps escaped, but no one screamed. The hum deepened, the descent growing steeper. Through the windows, the world outside began to change. Steel walls gave way to stone. The smooth surfaces of the hive's interior shifted into rough-hewn arches carved high overhead. Symbols marked them, sigils that twisted when the eye lingered too long, shapes that seemed to writhe in the shadows. The light outside grew dimmer, the incense thicker, searing my throat as I drew breath. I tried to swallow it down, but the taste was ashes, heavy and clinging. I breathed again, slower, as if ritual could steady me. The capsule slowed, the hum fading to a low drone. The brass fittings gleamed faintly, the wood creaked under our weight, and the doors before us prepared to open. The capsule hissed open, and the first thing I saw were statues. They loomed on either side of the corridor, carved from black stone so dark it seemed to swallow the lumen light. Their faces were twisted into masks of agony and ecstasy. Mouths frozen mid-cry, eyes wide, as if beholding something too great or too terrible to name. For a moment they were still, but when the lumen strips overhead flickered, the shadows shifted, and in that stuttering half-light, the statues seemed to move. Hands reached further, faces stretched as if the stone itself breathed. The corridor stretched forward, long and narrow, its walls lined with alcoves, where servo skulls drifted silently. Their bone-white faces gleamed faintly red lenses, glowing like coals trailing incense smoke that curled and mixed with the sharp sting of ozone. Each skull whispered as it passed, vox grills, hissing cables twitching like tails. The air was thick, heavy, dense, with the weight of sanctity and machinery. Every breath I took burned faintly sweet with incense, but edged with iron. Then I saw them, the custodians. They stood flanking a great archway, motionless, yet radiating a presence that struck harder than any sound. Their armor was gold, not the pale brass of fittings or the dull shimmer of lumen light, but true gold that seemed to carry its own glow, polished until even the shadows bent away from it. Each held a guardian spear, the weapon humming with restrained energy, and though they did not move, the weight of their gaze pressed on my chest until I could scarcely breathe. They did not acknowledge us. They did not need to. Their very stillness declared that we were nothing, dust before a storm, mortals before perfection. Past them, the corridor opened into a vast domed chamber. My feet faltered. The room was filled with thrones, dozens of them, maybe more, arranged in concentric circles around a central dais. They were not empty. Each throne was carved from black material that seemed to drink the light around it, its surface veined with crystalline growths that pulsed with dim internal fire. Tubes coiled from their bases, crawling across the floor like veins disappearing into the walls. The crystal filaments shimmered faintly, throbbing with rhythm like a heartbeat. And upon the thrones sat people. At first I thought them statues too, for they did not move. But then I saw their chests rising and falling shallow, mechanical, as though breath itself had been mechanized. Their eyes were rolled white lids, half open, unseeing. Tubes pierced their arms, their necks, their skulls, feeding them into the crystal, binding them to the thrones. They were alive, but not alive. Their bodies endured, but their selves were gone, emptied, hollowed out, until only flesh remained to feed the machine. The silence of the chamber was worse than any scream. It pressed against the ears, thick, suffocating, filled only by the low hum of unseen engines. Then the figure in red robes spoke. His voice came through a vox grill, metallic and pitiless, echoing up into the dome. "Here, individual existence ends," he intoned, "and true purpose begins." The words did not rise or fall. They were level, absolute, a judgment rendered by something that had forgotten pity long ago. The sound of it sank into me, into all of us, until our very breathing felt commanded. I could not look away. The thrones pulsed. The tubes throbbed. The crystal filaments shimmered brighter for a moment, as though hearing the declaration and answering it. My heart hammered. My throat tightened. I tried to imagine myself bound there, eyes rolled, white body still breathing, but mind consumed. The thought hollowed me. Confusion, fear, awe, all tangled into a single knot in my chest. Around me, the others stared, too silent, paralyzed, caught between terror and reverence. The chamber seemed to hum louder, unseen power flowing through its veins, the light dimming, though no lumen had failed. It was darker, heavier, as though the room itself had swallowed us whole. My face must have betrayed everything I felt, for I could sense the moment linger, as though unseen eyes studied me, weighed me, found me lacking. The chamber breathed. The shadows leaned closer. The light grew darker.